Hello, and firstly, I would like to give you a very warm welcome to this, the next in the Transformative Teachers webinar series. My name is Alex Thorpe. I'm the lead academic for language at Trinity College London for Europe, and I'll be your host today, together with Angelos Molas, and he will be joining us in a couple of minutes. So firstly, you won't be able to see yourself and we don't have your audio enabled. This is because Angelos and I are hosts and we have set the permissions, so we will be running the permissions on this webinar. And I just want to spend 1 or 2 minutes orientating you to what we're actually doing and what you have available to you on your screen. So first of all, you should be able to see me and you'll be able to see a presentation, a PowerPoint, and that's how we'll be sharing as we go through this. These webinars will be recorded and we will be posting a link to that recording on the link that you can see now on your screen. Now, you can see the screen view with me at the moment, and in a moment, Angelos, and also the PowerPoint. And you'll see there are some other things that you can touch, you can use on your screens. Now, first of all, down the bottom, you'll notice there are some links, and you'll see there is a chat, there is a Q&A, and some other options there. And I'm just going to tell you about those. If you do have technical problems, so you cannot hear or things are not clear, it's probably worth logging out and logging back in. These are usually due to broadband width and connection, so do try logging out and back in. So looking down the bottom of your screen, you'll notice there is a chat box. Now, when we use the chat box, these are general comments that everyone can see, but the chat at first is only for panelists. So you'll see a little blue box when you click on chat. Can you change that if you're going to use the chat function, not to all panelists, but change it to all panelists and attendees? And then everyone that's in this webinar from around the world will be able to see your comments. Now, I'm just going to practice a little bit using that chat box. Now, we've got people from many countries. This is a large webinar. So I'm just going to ask you in the chat box, can you write the local time where you are? So where I am, it's now 3 minutes past 3. So I'm in the UK, the south of the UK. And if you'll have a look, you'll see those coming through. So we really have afternoons, oh, there's so many going through, mornings, evenings. So you can see there a little indication of the kind of geographies we're covering. So well done everyone for putting that in, and I can see all attendees can see them. Now, don't use the chat box if you have any questions about the webinar. You'll see there is also a Q&A pod. Now, if you click on the Q&A, you will be able to write questions. Those questions will be for the panelists to answer throughout the webinar. Please note there are a lot of people in this webinar and we will try to answer as many questions as we can, but we will of course have to be realistic. So we won't be able to answer everything, but if you have a question, please put that in the Q&A box and we'll try and get that answered for you. So what I would like to say is enjoy the webinar. As you know, the webinar is about effective communicative teaching online. And today we're going to be looking at the lower levels of the CFR, that's A1 and A2. So I'm now going to hand over to our main host today. So welcome, Angelos Molas, over to you for the webinar on effective communicative teaching online.
Thank you very much, Alex. Hello, everyone. Can you type in the chat box very quickly if you can hear me, if sound is okay? For most of you it is, that's great, absolutely fine. So I am going to start sharing now my new, thank you very much for confirming. Excellent, great. Right, guys, so as Alex said, today we are looking at effective communicative online teaching. We will focus a little bit more on speaking and listening today, mainly because those who are new to online teaching tend to find that speaking doesn't get the attention it usually gets in our face-to-face classes. So we will have a look into some activities and some tools, some websites that we can use to help our learners develop our speaking and listening skills. And in particular, we will focus today on A1 and A2 levels. Today, we're focusing on B1, B2, and on Friday on C1 and C2. So let's get going. Let's start with the CEFR and A1, what it really means. So we have words that come from this global scale. Descriptors are familiar, personal, everyday. So this gives us a sense of the vocabulary that A1 learners should be focusing on. Simple phrases, basic expressions, they speak slowly, and so on. Now, the CFR is a very, very, if you like, long document, and a nice way perhaps to see this broken down into levels and in a manner that really helps. It really informs our teaching decisions, our decisions when it comes to materials design. I always find that the descriptors that we have for the GESI exams are very, very user-friendly. We are not going to look into those. You will have a chance to look these on the website of Trinity. The important thing to mention here, and Alex can confirm, is that they give us an idea of what is expected from our learners at this level, but most importantly, what is that we should be focusing on in class. So if we have a quick look at the language functions of the GESI 1, for instance, we see exchanging greetings, giving personal information, identifying a naming items given in the lexical list down here. So this gives us an idea of what sort of lessons we should be focusing on, what sort of activities we should be giving our learners to perform to ensure that they practice the language features, the functions, grammar, lexis, but also the skills in that level. So Alex, I don't know if you want to perhaps say anything about how teachers maybe they could use this, even if they're not preparing their learners for these particular exams.
Yeah, I think, again, when you look at the exam specifications for something like GESI, they're a very useful breakdown of the CEFR. They also include the communicative skills. And again, when we look at online teaching, a bit like you said, Angelos, I think it's tempting to lean towards reading and writing more than speaking and listening, because it's easier on an online platform. So really, you have something like GESI, which really pulls out also the communicative side of what's in the CFR. So also those communicative skills. So it's just a good breakdown, something nice and clear.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that. So we start with the first idea, which is very straightforward. I'm sure all of you teaching A1 and A2 learners, but A1 in particular, is to use pictures. Pictures are so versatile. You can use pictures to help your learners describe pictures, what they see. They can describe every single perhaps detail that they see in that picture, or you can show them something and you can ask them to go in the room and find something similar to show, or you might share a photograph of your pet and they can share a photograph of their pet and can start describing it. What we see here is a website I really use when I want to use pictures in my lessons. This is eltpics.com, and this really is pictures that teachers upload for other teachers to use freely. So on that website, you can find any picture you like. You can search by subject, by item, and you'll find a plethora of pictures there to use in your lessons. And one activity, another very, very sort of easy activity that I have here is just to describe objects. This is a vocabulary area that A1 learners in particular need to develop, and you can use You can use photographs that you find online, and you can use your pointer, your mouse to show and indicate particular items and invite the learners to say the name, to use the word, or you can ask your learners maybe to imitate, to mimic the an action that they do with a particular object, and the other learners perhaps to guess what is that they are talking about. You don't necessarily need to use, of course, pictures for that, but you can use real objects. Another one that you can do with pictures is to animate them. And this is a really nice interactive activity that you can do with your group of learners online. You can project a picture. In this case, I just have this field here. And you can invite them when you share the screen using the annotation function of the annotation function of Zoom or your online teaching platform. You can invite them to add icons, to add perhaps pictures. You can of course ask them to draw, but it is always a little bit easier to insert ready-made icons. For this particular one, I used PowerPoint. So I had this particular image, I had it in a PowerPoint presentation, and then I gave my learners rights to be able to use my PowerPoint, to use my computer. When you give over mouse control, you can do that, and they could select the item or the icon that we're talking about. Similarly, you can say things like, I don't know, place a zebra underneath the tree. And this way you're practicing a little bit of animal related vocabulary and along with prepositions. Another activity that we have for A1 learners is just to use your electronic whiteboard. In this case, you can prepare your whiteboard, your electronic whiteboard in advance. You can type various numbers. Typically for A1 level, we would focus on, you know, from 0 to 20 perhaps, and you can project your whiteboard, you can share it with your learners, and you can invite them to point at particular numbers or to circle them using the annotation function. You can ask them maybe to, you can point at a particular number and ask them to maybe guess what this number might mean for you. So I could point at 11 and invite my learners to guess, what is 11 for me? And I could reveal that 11 stands for November, the month I was born. So little activities that you can, you know, use with your learners, just using the basic features that you get with your your online platform. Alex?
I was just going to say, so you've mentioned several basic features, and firstly around using pictures and now the whiteboard. So I wondered if you could just mention when you said about using animations. So could you just confirm, I know different platforms have different tools, but animation is one of those fairly basic tools that comes with most platforms, isn't it? Now we're on Zoom today, but many platforms offer that. What does animation do? How can a teacher use it?
So the way I did it when I was preparing this, just to give an example, is I opened a PowerPoint presentation. I inserted the image on a slide, and then I shared my desktop with the learners. So the learners could view my desktop in a very similar way that our participants now can view my presentation. But the thing that I do with my learners, which I haven't done today, is I enabled the mouse control function. So my learners could use my PowerPoint even if they are not here physically next to me.
Okay.
And what they could do through PowerPoint, through the PowerPoint that I had open in front of them, is that they could go to PowerPoint and press insert icon, and there is a huge list of icons. There are different areas. You have objects, you have animals, you have persons as well. And then I could say, now, like I said earlier, place a zebra underneath a tree, and they could literally just find a zebra and insert it.
Brilliant. So there are these basic functions, and you've used share screen, you've used animation, and you've imported a PowerPoint. So they're the things you've done in combination. And I think with those pictures, just going back, we were talking about speaking and listening as well. So, and I know we've covered these in other webinars, but things like describing a picture, you could create breakout rooms, for example, where groups of students could describe those or talk about them and do a task together.
Absolutely. I think what is very important to do always when it comes to teaching, in particular to teaching online, is if you have that activity as a sort of an open class main room, as we would say now, activity where everyone would participate. So all your learners maybe focus on your picture, and then you can send them in breakout rooms and ask them to share their own picture with one another or in their little groups, and then they can start describing what they see. They could, if we're talking about these particular days where most of our learners are at their homes, you could ask them to just take a picture of what happens outside their window. And if you are teaching in an area where most of your learners are in the same city, they could perhaps see different streets of the same city as well, and what's happening at the same time.
And I guess then if students came out of breakout rooms, or you bring the class together, even if you have a class of 20 or 30, you could give rights to one student or another student so they could speak to the whole group and give some feedback, maybe not with video, with certain issues around using video with younger learners, but we could get feedback as well.
Of course, it is important every time. I think we covered that on our breakout room webinar as well, for those of you that were present, that when it comes to sending people to breakout rooms, it's very important that they're very, very well prepared. So they know maybe who's the group secretary or the facilitator of each group, who maybe collect notes. And then when we are back in the main room area, they can share a little bit of feedback of what happened in that room.
So really useful. So just summarizing lots of those different tools. So sharing your screen, breakout rooms, and now onto the whiteboard again, which exists in most platforms. So, all right, sorry to interrupt.
So the idea, as you highlighted, the idea is that we cannot afford as teachers at this stage, at least, when we are into that emergency situation, we cannot afford to include, a multitude of new tools and new websites. So it is quite important to maximize the affordances that we get from each simple tool that we have and that we know how to use. I am going to continue with one more idea for A1 level learners, and this is the creation of avatars. And I have here Voki, which is an absolutely wonderful tool. There is a free version of it, which you can use. Teachers can use, of course, with their learners. And this is the creation of avatars. And especially if you're teaching younger learners, and I can only assume that the majority of us teaching A1 and A2 level learners are teaching younger learners. Using Voki is amazing. They really like it. You create your own avatar, and what this means for language practice, if you like, is that you can practice a lot of adjectives that describe a person's characteristic. They can change the avatar. You can create an avatar that has not only perhaps, you can focus on hair, on eye color, on clothes. So it is a very, very nice sort of creative way for learners to use the language. And finally, of course, just use props, realia, whatever you have. Use the physical environment of your learners. Make them, make them act out maybe things. You show an object, make them act out what they do with that object. Make them use their hands. Make them use other object that they have near them. They can show you through the camera, they can come closer, they can stand up, they can sit down. So I would say use that. It's important not only in terms of the learning benefits that we get, but also for, you know, you don't want to have somebody sitting behind a screen, especially if they're very young, for a very long time. So it's quite important to make them move around a little bit.
Thank you. And I was also going to say, I mean, all of the things you mentioned, there's a lot of personalization. So learners being able, you mentioned their town, you know, their houses, their phones, their images, and in this case, their realia, which I think is really useful. Is this only useful ideas for younger learners? We've spoken mainly about children so far, but many learners that are A1 may be adults or older learners.
That's true. And well, in my experience, every good activity that works with young learners works really well with adults, because we need that break in our, you know, from our lives as well. But in, you know, all of them, with the perhaps Voki and creating avatars might be something that not all adult learners, but many really enjoy. But all the other things are things that you can do with your adults as well.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think as teachers, we really have to think about any of the language an activity generates. So it's not about the product or the end of the activity. It's about all the language that happens in between, both coming from the learner and both what they're exposed to. So I think many of these we could use, certainly adapt for any age of learner.
And of course, when it comes to lower level learners, especially when we're talking about A1, even more so, it is important for us to remember that reception comes first, production comes second. So no matter whatever you want to make them do, to make them produce, it is a good idea to first give it to them. So as I said earlier, if you want to use a picture, first model an answer and then get them to perhaps chip in their own answers as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think obviously there are so many contexts that we're addressing here, and every context will be different. So for some, in some locations, there may be a way of using pictures that may not be appropriate for another location. So as teachers, again, I think we need to look at the activity, think how it would fit for the learners we're working with, and they're all very, very adaptable.
That's one of the reasons why I showed eltpics.com at the beginning, is because those pictures are taken by teachers and are to be used by teachers. And this is not only for copyright issues, which is a very, very important aspect when it comes to online, especially online teaching, but also in terms of the content and what those pictures depict. They are vetted by a group of teachers who are based in a variety of contexts to ensure that, you know, those pictures would be appropriate for all contexts, if not most of them. And we are moving on to A2. Now we see the word communication here in the CFR global scale descriptors. And it is communication that has to do with the learner's immediate environment. So we are still within what's close to them, what's familiar to them, things that have to do with their family, but also now we move into things that have to do with their jobs, things that have to do with their friends. We start going a little bit further away from the person and more into what is personal, but we are still into basic and simple communication, and how this translates to the Trinity Jessie descriptors. Again, you can use those handbooks that you can find freely on the Trinity website, and you can have a look at what sort of functions we're expecting. And you see here the difference from the A1, the very beginning, to when we go to the higher sort of end of A2, where our learners should be given opportunities to practice talking about past events, things like expressing likes and dislikes, and so on. So this is a really useful if you like, framework for your lessons and your materials design. So let's see some more activities and maybe tools that we can use. So again, here I will repeat the same idea of using the electronic whiteboard, but here we're moving from numbers to sentence structure. And here's a very good activity, very easy to set up. Put questions in jumbled order on your whiteboards, on your electronic whiteboards, when you are in main room mode. So when you have all your learners together, give them again annotation rights so they can use the whiteboard and they can drag and drop each word, so they can start perhaps creating sentences by putting the words in the right order. And once you have your questions in the right order, you can, again, to give them a little bit of speaking and listening practice, you can send them in breakout rooms, get them to ask and answer each other questions, and then get them back in the main room to report. Or when they're back in the main room, you can nominate and ask them those questions to share their answers with the rest of the class. Again, something quite easy to set up. It doesn't require any additional knowledge other than using the platform that you are using to teach online. Online teaching, of course, gives us the opportunity to use authentic sources. Simply, you go to your browser, you use a website that you think is going to be useful for your learners, and you can share your desktop with them, and they can follow your mouse, they can see what you show to one another. So perhaps you can use something like AccuWeather, any weather sort of related website, and get them to practice weather related vocabulary, which is something that they need to start doing at the beginning of the A2 level. So you can point at different those symbols here and ask them to say, oh, sunny, but a little bit, sunny and cloudy, rainy, things, adjectives like these ones. And also then you can start exploring the website a little bit better. If you are teaching learners who come maybe from a variety of cities within your own country, maybe they have a country house, maybe they went away last summer somewhere, you can send them into breakout rooms and ask them to explore the weather in various places. And these places could be, explore the weather of the place that you went on holiday last summer.
Yeah, and I guess, and also I was just thinking the earlier example you had of the field with the animal icons, and where learners can drag images around, so using PowerPoint again and sharing screen. I guess you could do lots of activities with pictures of different weather symbols with the countries they might associate that with, or activities, or again, these kind of almost substitution tables, but you're using images, and then you could generate sentences from it, that kind of thing. So again, it's pulling in these different ideas, but applying, in this case, the different lexical sets, the different groups of words in a context.
Exactly. The ones in the participants list that have been experienced when it comes to teaching in face-to-face classrooms, they certainly remember the days when we didn't have interactive whiteboards, and we had many flashcards that we used in the classroom, and we used our whiteboard so much. We used to draw really well, and we used to sort of doing those matching activities, because this was our only tool back. That was really 10 years ago, not that long ago. So those teachers remember how important the whiteboard is and how versatile it is. And this goes back to what you said, that now that we can use the whiteboard within this electronic environment, it gives us the opportunity to use all these other tools where you don't need to necessarily to match and glue the first animal and then the second and then the third and lose time, but you can just literally just drag and drop.
I'm glad you say that most of us were very good at drawing on whiteboards. I was never that good, but often funny results. But You also mentioned, Angelos, about using websites, and I think we have to be a little bit careful around this. And any advice you'd give to teachers around using websites or taking screenshots that they use within lessons?
Well, I think teachers know their teaching context really well, and as you said earlier, this varies not only the age group you teach, but also the local context and the local sort of rules, written or unwritten, that apply to teaching and learning. So things to keep in mind when you take screenshots of websites would be perhaps make sure the ads that appear next to within a website that are appropriate. Sometimes they aren't. Ensure that whatever is that you project is culturally appropriate and age specific, especially the ones that are teaching early years. Young learners are, I'm sure they all are very well literate when it comes to what to choose and what to avoid when it comes to sharing things with young learners.
Thank you.
Another idea I have here, which I really like, it is very, very easy to use. I like doing it on my own time, not only when I teach, is to use puzzles. And this website I have here, the jigsawplanet.com, is very, very important, very, very useful for us, because what it does is we can upload an image. For example, I can upload this sort of map for directions image, and automatically I ask the website to break it down into an X number. I give the number to the website of pieces, and then this is the result. This is what my image now looks like. So I can start my lesson with that, which many young learners and adult learners really enjoy. I can give my learners mouse control. They can put they can solve the puzzle here, the jigsaw. They can put the picture back together, and once the picture is back in its original form, I can then give them a speaking or a listening task where they can start practicing directions, language related to directions, and also not only in terms of vocabulary, phrases like turn right, turn left, go straight ahead, but also maybe functional language, maybe using questions, maybe using polite questions versus informal questions. So it's a very versatile website. It is free. It is very, very friendly to use. So I would definitely suggest you give it a go. And then moving on to a little bit of engagement when it comes to sort of offline life. Most of us are spending so much time online these days. It's quite important to give them something to do when they are not online. So you can ask them when they go, if in your context people are allowed to go out for a stroll around their area, if they can go to a near park, you can ask them to go outside and narrate, share their experience. Maybe you can ask them to record 1 minute or maybe 30 seconds if you think your learners are not ready for a 1 minute long recording, where they can talk about what they see at a particular moment. So they can say, I see, I don't know, 3 big blocks of flats. Next to them, there is a park, and next to it, there is a supermarket. They can use Vocaroo, which is a very, very easy website to use. All they have to do, this is literally what you see here is the website. All they have to do, without creating any account and sharing any information, they press the red button, they record, they speak to their phones, and when they are ready, when they finish, the system asks them to type the email address of their teacher. they type the email address of the teacher, and automatically the recording lands on your inbox. So it is a very easy way for you to get them to a little bit of speaking when they're offline. And when they're in class, what you can do is you can send them into breakout rooms, you can share those recordings with them, and you can make them guess where the learners were when they recorded that. So if they are within the same area, if you are teaching students that are located in the same city, again, they can listen to each other's audio description, and they can say, oh, I think you are in that part, I think you are there. And you can make it, you can turn it into an interactive activity. And the same you can do with just their phone. If you have maybe more adult learners, they can record a video rather than, you know, just their voice, and they can add a voice over where they explain, they describe what they see. Alex?
Well, I was just going to say, I see people have been saying it's very difficult to get some students to actively communicate online because they feel it's permanent and recorded, and, you know, there's a little bit of shyness perhaps and feeling slightly intimidated around using English. And I think Bokaru is a really nice idea, but I wonder, a couple of questions have been coming up. So can you use different media in different breakout rooms? So you have breakout rooms that look at different things?
You can use breakout rooms are very versatile. Every breakout room is each breakout room is different, and you can assign different things to different breakout rooms. Absolutely, this is up to the teacher. To go back a little bit to that statement, which I think is a very, very powerful, if you like, observation, the fact that learners do feel very often intimidated to share their audio, to share perhaps something that they've recorded because they feel maybe uncomfortable with themselves using English. I'll just show, for the very same rationale, this particular tool, voicethread.com, which, like Voki, it records learners' voice. It can record learners' camera as well if they want to, or it can record simple text. So the beauty of this particular tool that I've been using, I think, for the last 7 years now, is that learners record something and then they can listen to it. So before they publish it, before it becomes permanent for you to then go listen and monitor, they have the chance to listen to it, and if they're not happy, they re-record it, and if they're not happy, they re-record it. And the power of rehearsing a particular monologue description, a particular bit of output is really beneficial for our learners. It really aids their noticing skills. They become aware of their own language use. We give them the opportunity to self-correct. And also with this particular tool, which can be used in a very interactive way, but whoever really wants to explore that, they can look it up. It's a really, really nice tool. Is that if you use this with your class, so if you allow multiple participants to add their piece of that thread that you want to create, they can, maybe the shy ones, they can start by typing. So they can start typing a response to something, to a task. And then maybe the second time you use it, they might listen to their peers who were sort of brave and posted their audio, and they can then feel that now it's time for them to start recording their audio. It takes time. It is not something that will happen overnight. And it is important to keep those instances very short, very focused on a particular task that is achievable, but also to work with tools that will make the learners listen, self-correct, and then share.
And I think these are excellent ideas, but also not just self-correction, but peer correction, in that you could have two students working together using whatever online or distant communication they use, so WhatsApp, whatever it might be, so they could work collaboratively to create something like a voice thread. And when they agree it's ready, then they can send it through. So they can work with friends, and it doesn't matter if they use their L1, their first language, a lot as they work with the English as well. I think that's a very positive suggestion.
I definitely agree with the use of L1 when it comes to planning a particular activity or planning a response, planning a project. It is very important for us to accept that they should be using that. They should have that level of confidence that they can manage the task. If we give them that confidence, if they can do all the planning on their own, if they can use the L1 to do the planning of their response, and then they use English to perform the actual task, then what we are doing is that we minimize their defense mechanisms. We minimize any obstacles that they might have in performing the task. And then their focus is no longer on the content of their performance, on the content of their response, but their focus is now on the language they will use to deliver the content. And this is what makes them then really focus and develop on their language.
Yeah, no, I think really good points. And again, I think this has come up in the thread I've noticed a few times around instructions and how to make these things clear. And I think there's a lot more discourse now around code switching and translanguaging, the idea of looking at how we move from one language into another rather than falsely separating them out. But that's not a discussion for now.
It isn't. The only thing that I will say is that when a learner comes to our class, the first tool that they already have developed, we need to do nothing about it, is their L1. Their brain is structured around a language, and the best thing we can do is make use of that. Of course, make informed use of that, but it is important now even more so because we have the additional barrier of online communication, of technology, maybe technical problems that they might be facing. It is important to utilize L1. If we share the same L1 with our learners, absolutely give instructions to difficult tasks in the L1 as well as in English, so that learners feel more confident with the task. And I would definitely say to those of our colleagues who teach younger learners, include the parents in the process. They are at home at the moment and they are asked to homeschool their children, and the majority of parents do not know. They're not educators. So if we can include them in our process, really we help them help their children for other lessons as well.
And I think often teachers stress a nervousness around the technology, but more often than not, the learners, even of a young age, are very adept, very quick at using this kind of technology. And it's us teachers that sometimes struggle.
Yes, most of my days I spend with learners explaining to me what I should be doing, because they know most of these better than I do. And just moving on, we're about to end here. I have this final activity. I took it from the Trinity website. I will show this website to you in a second. And it is how we can maybe play a bingo game. We don't need to do this necessarily with all the learners at the same time. We can do it once, we can model it, and then we can send them in groups, in breakout rooms, and they can do that. Or we can adapt this activity and make them talk about each of these cards for a given period of time. So maybe for 20, 30 seconds, you have to talk about what you're going to do after class. And immediately after that, tell me about where you were before the class, just to give them the chance to practice speaking for extended speech, perhaps continuous speech, which is always a good activity to do with the learners. And you can do it at the end, toward the end of each lesson, at the beginning of lessons. You can have lessons just focused around this particular task. Finally, I'd like to, oh, sorry, Alex, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, putting these different activities together so you could use those prompts and then record on some of the previous tools you've mentioned. So again, adding these tools together and just thinking how you can use the different activities with the different tools. And also, this is something that you could do for learners that were very low level. You could start in their L1, do it in L1 first, and then move over to English, because it will help them to bridge those languages. So lots of little steps that kind of cover all these points.
Yes, absolutely. Use of L1 is very, very important at lower level, as we said. And that's a great idea, actually, to play the game first in the L1 and then move to L2. Very, very good point there. The last resource I'd like to share with you is another wonderful one. It's breakingnewsenglish.com. And what this source has is current news, current affairs that are graded according to different levels. The beauty of that when it comes to listening and speaking practice is that you find each particular news story not only in written form but also in video form, and you can choose the level of each video. So if you want to talk about, say here I have, I don't know, Paris buns daytime exercise. If you click on that link, then you see the video and there are different levels. So this one you cannot use with lower levels because it starts from level 4. But the first one, 1991, was the best year for music. If I click level 0, that will be appropriate for A1. And it is an actual video that learners can listen to, and maybe then you can ask them some very easy comprehension questions. And then level 1 is for A2. Now, why is this important? This is important because we're all very busy, and this way you can plan more or less one lesson and you can adapt it to the different levels you might be teaching. So you can use this with A1, A2, and even sort of B1 levels as well, to give them a little bit of listening practice. So just to summarize what we've said so far, I have so far, draw on your learners' visual literacy skills. So use pictures, images, animations, things that they can relate to. All those things, pictures, images, animation, they're not language, they're not in English, so they can initially relate to them, and then you can bring in the L2. Engage them, use what they like. You know your learners, you know if they like storytelling, if they like animations, you know if they're adults, if they like playing games like the bingo game we saw earlier. Make them notice. So it's a great time that we have now that everybody's at home. So make them record their answers orally, make them listen to their own responses, and promote noticing and self-correction. Invite descriptions of things, get them to talk to you and say what they see, what's in the bedroom, what's in their desk, what is in their office, what is that they have right next to the computer, what is that they did yesterday, what is that they see when they go out. Promote pair work and group work. And here I have added something that Alex said earlier. Promote pair and group work that happens online, but outside class time. So it's not only the breakout room activity that we have as a tool now that we are all at home, but also they can use whatever medium they use with their friends to perform a task. If they are, if you have adult learners, adult lower level learners, they can use maybe WhatsApp and record a conversation they have with their peers. They can open a special channel where they only chat in English, or maybe they use audio chat rather than typing, just to give them some additional speaking practice. Develop their creativity with things like the avatars that we saw earlier. So engage them in creative activities. And finally, I said before, I talked about this website. If you go to the Trinity website, it doesn't matter if you are working with the Trinity exams, if you are preparing your learners for those exams, but you can go into that tab of levels and resources and find many activities for each level. So activities for A1, activities for A2, for higher A2, for low B1, for high B1, and so forth. And all these activities, they are adaptable. You can simply, if you don't have time to adapt them, you can just simply share your screen. Your learners can view the activity, and then they can go to a breakout room and do it, practice using the language, and come back. So I think it's a great resource. I think I will stop here, and maybe we can focus on questions or any comments that Alex, you might have.
Well, yeah, a few, and thank you very much. You know, some brilliant ideas. And one thing that's come up quite a lot is that many learners don't have a desktop PC. They might be using another device, so maybe a tablet, maybe even a smartphone. How adaptable or applicable are all these ideas for learners that just have a smartphone or a smaller device?
All those ideas are applicable. If you share a screen, they can see it when they're on their phones, they can see it when they're on their tablets. They can go, even if they're on their phones and you want to share your screen and you want to use an additional tool, all they do is they go from one screen to another on their phones. They just add another tab. So when you're on your browser, or say you are on Zoom app, now that we are on Zoom, you have your Zoom app on your mobile phone, and if your teacher asks you to look at something that is not being shared through Zoom, but you might need to access separately, you don't need to close, you don't need to log out of the room, you simply open your browser. For that part, you will not be looking at Zoom, you'll be looking at your browser. And you can find the information that the teacher asked you and then come back. I think if you are teaching classes where your learners are not using a laptop, the best thing to do is to use screen share a lot. So whatever you want your learners to look at, share it through your computer. This way, everything is centralized. They can only use this one application, and through that, you can explore activities, tasks, or other websites.
And I think, Angelos, a lot of what you've done today is using the basic tools that come with most platforms. So that is screen share. You've then got your breakout rooms, and you've got the whiteboard. Now, I think all platforms have those features in one form or another. So it's just looking at how to apply those in your context, your class, and adapting the kind of activities.
Exactly. And the one thing that we keep on saying on these webinars is don't go for everything at once. Just start with one thing. Start with what you are familiar with. So if you are familiar with PowerPoint, you can start using PowerPoint. You don't need anything else. Upload pictures on PowerPoint, and then just use the different functions that you have here or here on any virtual learning environment, virtual classroom. Use the annotation function where learners can actually use your screen and interact with it.
And again, that's something you just set in the permissions when you create your session in Zoom or Adobe or whatever the platform might be.
And even if you don't have that on your, if you haven't done that before the session, you always have the opportunity to change the settings during the session. And I say this because I know many of our colleagues might be teaching a variety of levels, which means a variety of settings as well. Or if you know, some of us teaching young learners and adults, which means that we need to change through, you know, settings all the time, but you can do it during the session. You start your session. It is when you are the host of a session, you just go on more and you choose enable annotation, and then everybody can annotate.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of really practical ideas. And again, it's really drawing on these. And the other thing I would suggest is ask your students, the learners, what do they want to use? Because they very often come back with tools that they have found when they've been looking and learning English online, and they often come forward with some really good suggestions too.
And also, it's important to ask them for feedback on the on the activities or the websites or the tools that we are using with them, because more often than not, we find a great activity, we spend time, we plan it, we get it going, they perform the task, and then from feedback, we find out that we might not have been as useful for them as we may have wished. So we know maybe to tweak it for next time, to change it a little bit.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, great. Well, Angelos, thank you very, very much. It's been really informative and lots of ideas I think we can all take away and adapt and work with. So thank you very much to those that have attended this session. I hope you found something there of use to you. This is the first of 3 webinars. The next one will be at the same time tomorrow, but we'll be focusing on other tools for higher levels of the CEFRs. So we'll be looking at B1 and B2, particularly with speaking and listening. So do please, if you have not registered, feel free to register. We have still opened, or reopened the registration for that. And similarly, the event on Friday. Friday's webinar will be also looking at speaking and listening, but in that case, it's for C1 and C2 level learners. I'd love to say a big thank you to those that are moderating this session. You may have noticed we've had something like 100 questions answered as we've gone along. Very sorry if we've not managed to answer your questions. We've been trying very hard. There's a great number of us here, but do join us next time. This session has been videoed and you will receive a link to the video, and that will be on the main webpage for all these sessions. So I'd like to say thank you very much again. And Angelos, any closing words?
Well, I'll see all of you tomorrow, and we'll see some more tools. And even though we've sort of, separated the tools, and we say some of these work for A1 and A2, and some from B1, B2, and then on Friday, as you said, we will look into the higher levels. But most of these tools, especially the ones we're looking at tomorrow, you can of course adapt them to lower levels or higher levels as well. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. But thank you very much, Angelos. Again, thank you for the team that have worked behind the scenes here. Wishing you all a wonderful afternoon or evening, wherever you are. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow.